Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. I'm super excited today. We're going to hop on a call with Nancy Caruso, who is the undisputed, amazing, super inspiring scientist and conservationist that does amazing work on abalone and kelp ecosystems in California. So we're about to have a Zoom call with her, and I wanted to invite you to join us. We've got Nancy Caruso from Get Inspired with us today. Nancy, thank you so much for taking time out of your very, very busy schedule. It seems like you've been in the field a lot lately. Is that true?
That's true. Good weather here in the fall in Southern California.
We visited you about, I don't know when it was. It was in the summer. We weren't able to get out into the field, but when the pandemic's over, I would love to get out. And I've seen the pictures of going through the shallow water surf zone looking for abalone. That looks like a pretty fun day activity.
It is a fun day activity. And right now, the weather in Southern California is it's like warm during the day and then it's cool at night, but the sun's really hot during the day. So it's like 60 degrees, but in the sun it feels like 80. And the water temperature, don't get me wrong, is cold. It's about low 55, 56 degrees, but it makes such a difference when the sun is nice and warm. Beautiful.
The way I like to do these interviews is I like to break them into 5 questions. So my first question is, when you Google Nancy Caruso, you see the kelp lady. This is like the name that you have been given in the press and in science. Can you tell us how you got that nickname? It's sort of an odd one, and how your work on kelp has led you to do work on abalone.
Well, in 2002, I got hired to start the largest kelp restoration project to date on the planet, as far as I can tell. And it was the entire Southern California Bight, which is about 600 miles of coastline. We had lost 80% of our kelp. And so it was a big federally funded project, and I was hired to run the section of the project in Orange County, California, which is about 42 miles of coast. And I'm really outspoken, so I kind of leapt ahead of the other people on the project, and really was able to generate a lot of public support. 5,000 kids were involved in growing the kelp to restore it in Orange County. And I taught almost 300 volunteer divers to plant it and monitor it in the ocean. And so I was really outspoken about kelp, trying to get in the media. And I mean, how do you get people excited about an algae, right? So the media gave me the name, the Kelp Lady. And I kind of like it, actually. I love kelp. It is my favorite habitat on the planet, and so that's how I got the name. That's my email address too. Um, and then abalone came about because we had also lost a lot of our abalone species here in Southern California through overharvest and, of course, habitat loss. We'd lost our kelp. So that was the obvious next choice for restoration in Southern California. Once we have the habitat back, the kelp forest, which is the foundation of all of our coastal ecosystems along the coast, underwater. The next logical choice would be the thing that eats the kelp, and that's abalone. So, and I've added a few other species here and there as well, but they all live in and around the kelp forest, and that's the most important thing to me. I'm actually working now on an invasive species in our kelp forest that has come into the United States, and now I've got to shore that up, or else again we don't have a habitat for the abalone.
Trying to get people to care about kelp and then abalone. These are not charismatic species, in marine conservation. I don't know if you agree with this, but it seems like a lot of times the species that are the most charismatic, that are the ones that people can fall in love with the easiest, are the ones that tend to get the most advocacy and attention. How do you get people to care about kelp, or a sea snail, abalone? That seems like a really hard thing to get people passionate about. How do you do it?
Honestly, I am not sure how I'm able to do it. I guess it's just I'm pretty excited about it, and people like to be excited about things. So when I go into classrooms and pump up the students and basically put the fear of God into them, that they're going to be growing this species that there's no more of. And a lot of the students just cling to that opportunity. And I think really what it comes down to is I'm giving people the chance to physically make change, to change the world. And they can do it with their own hands just by helping me. They can see the changes in their lifetimes, just within a few years by helping me. So I think that's why people get excited about these non-charismatic. I think abalone is very charismatic, but I think that's what really does it for people to be able to see, wow, I did that. And they're hearing reports from friends, that their kelp forests are doing great, or they'll see the pictures that I'm sending out of the abalone they helped me to collect that we just spawned, and they produced 2 million baby abalone. So they feel almost grandmotherly like. I have a lot of people to say how, they email me, students that I had 10 years ago, and they'll email me and ask, how's our kelp? Or how's our abalone doing? So they're definitely taking ownership, and I think that's what endears it to them.
I've always loved that element of your work and how you engage people in such an intimate way into the process. Could you talk a little bit for people that aren't familiar with abalone and how you're growing them out? You're actually using students in their classrooms, and this is related to their slow growth rates and stuff. Could you talk a little bit about, how, I guess, the physiology of abalone and how you're utilizing students as part of your restoration strategy?
Yeah, sure. Abalone are beautiful, as we know, because you're making the beautiful clothing of the inside of their shells. And they, however, are not a charismatic species. And actually, I've found that people under the age of 40 don't even know what they are. So you're bringing a lot of awareness to abalone, because that pattern is beautiful, and art, which that pattern certainly is the way to engage people in science, right? What is that? What's an abalone? So they're digging deeper into your artwork that you're providing them on your clothing. But abalone are very long lived. They slow growing animals, and they start off their lives microscopically. The second day of their lives, they hatch from a shell, literally microscopically, about 400 times smaller than your eyes can see, and they immediately grow that little shell after they hatch from their egg. So if you ever look at an abalone shell, there's a little whorl in the shell, and the very, very, very center of that whorl is actually their very first shell that's grown, and it swirls out over time to where it can get as big as 12 inches. The largest abalone on the planet is the red abalone. But the larger they are, the better their survival, of course. It makes kind of sense when I put them in the ocean. And I've actually published a paper on that, so I know that it's true. But there's less and less predators that can consume them the bigger that they get. So I want to put them in the ocean and give them the best chance at survival. And that's going to require anywhere from 5 to 7 years of culturing these little baby abalone, growing them from microscopic up to about 10 centimeters, or about, what is that, 5 inches, about 5 inches in length. So that takes about 5 to 7 years. And that's a project. This is what's interesting about science, because nobody else is really doing this and putting that much effort in, because nobody can afford it. It takes a long, long time, and it's hard to get funding for a really long-lived project. So that's one of the reasons I'm so grateful for you. You have this wonderful product line that hopefully everybody's going to continue to love, because abalone is so beautiful, and you're able to contribute to this project for a long period of time. So so the classrooms are, there's always school. We thought this year we don't have schools. So I've actually employed some home schools to grow abalone. I've delivered a couple of tanks now to people's homes where they've got their kids and maybe a couple neighbor kids learning in their classrooms, in their home classroom, and they're growing them in their house for me. But the schools were a place where I could teach students about ecosystems so that we don't run into these problems later on, right? All these problems were man-made. So if I can educate the next generation, this is why we're in this predicament. let's protect the kelp forest and their inhabitants. And they get to help me along the way with growing these animals and becoming stewards of the animals.
I would have been so excited as like a middle schooler and high schooler to have had a abalone tank in my classroom.
Totally.
It would have been awesome. So you mentioned a little bit about our partnership and our abalone line is one of the most popular ones that we have. People are always curious when we make our donations to you. What do you use the money for? Like, what's a common use for those dollars, and so people can kind of have an understanding when they buy our products where that money is going to.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been asked that question as well. And our biggest expense, as you can guess, if we're growing them for 5 to 7 years, is actually growing them, caring for them. So we don't have an abalone farm. That was an option for me to build one. But instead, I decided to utilize current resources, and I actually rent space on an abalone farm in Santa Barbara, California. So we grow them in the United States. We grow red abalone for human consumption so that we don't have to take them out of the ocean anymore. That's illegal. So if you ever go to a restaurant and they have abalone on the menu, it's most likely from an abalone farm. And side note, the way you can tell to make sure it's not illegally taken from the ocean is that farm-raised abalone are only about 3 inches long. So if you order sushi and it's bigger than that, then it's probably taken from the wild illegally and poached. And so you can keep track of the way you eat your seafood, which I love to do, and where your seafood comes from just by knowing that little tidbit. But caring for the abalone, paying the farm rent, which is essentially like $25,000 a year to feed and care for our over 5,000 abalone right now. And they also help us with the spawns, which is a huge task. Now, I have some amazing news because in September the 29th, actually, if that's your birthday, you share it with 2 million other baby abalone because we just hatched 2 million of them the first week of October. And right now they are in the tanks. This is kind of, it's weird. Okay. So you can count the plankton because you can take a little drop of water, and abalone are planktonic for about 3 weeks. So you can take a drop of water and count the plankton under a microscope. But once they settle on the bottom, we can't count them anymore. So we have millions, we know from counting the plankton, of baby abalone that are settled in tanks right now, but we have no idea how many we have until about January. It takes about 3 months to get to the size where your eye can see them, and we can start counting them to see how many we got left. So keep your fingers crossed. We had about 2 million of them when we settled them. But also our costs go into doing field work. So we finally attained the use of a boat. We're a member of a boat club now that we can get outside into the subtidal areas. We were doing a lot of intertidal work for a long time. That's easy to get to. You just walk to the tide pools. But now we need to get out to the deeper offshore reefs and take volunteers with us with lots of gear, scuba tanks, and all of our surveying gear and things. So that's helping to pay for our boat costs as well, which we're really grateful to use as a member of a boat club.
I know you have been looking for a boat last year. I'm following on social. I saw, I'm like, she got the boat. And now you guys are out there. It's super, super exciting.
Yeah. And the best part is I don't have to own it. I just use theirs.
So they say that the best boat is your friend's boat.
Yes, that's exactly right. Because I've owned boats before and it's no fun. They're always broken. So all I do is drive it out and I bring the keys back and drop them in the box, and that's it.
That's perfect. Well, that can keep you focusing on your work, which is what you should be focusing on, and not distracted on making sure the boat's running right.
Exactly.
So my next question, I've run into more as with our customers, we get a lot of questions and comments on social media, and it relates to like fishermen and fishermen's impact on abalone. And I find that it's an interesting subject that, and not just with abalone, we see it in a lot of other fisheries, where sometimes it can feel like there is a I don't want to say a points of contention between the scientific community and the fishing community, whether it's commercial fishing or recreational fishing. But I'm always kind of find it strange that sometimes these two groups, science and fishing, who both want the same thing. You know, both groups want a thriving and vibrant ocean, that sometimes they can kind of get at each other. Has that been something that you've experienced in your career? And if so, how do you navigate that?
That's a good question. I'm going to grab this because if anybody is interested in learning about that history, let me get it in the light here. This is a new book out. It's titled Abalone, and it's by Ann Velisis. It's on Amazon, and she wrote a history, a 500-year history. She's an environmental historian of abalone, and it's a fantastic book, and it totally illustrates this back and forth fight, quote unquote, that's been going on since the 1500s in the United States about abalone. So if that interests you, definitely read it. But and sometimes we are at odds. You know, sometimes you're fighting for, no, we're right. No, we're right. Unfortunately, right now, but fortunately for the argument, there is no abalone fishery in California. So there's nothing to argue about. But I know this historical argument, and I'm actually an appointed member of the State Recreational Abalone Advisory Committee. So I sit on this committee to advise the state of California on the condition of the abalone fishery and to speak on behalf of the members of the fishery in Southern California. So I have been able to voice my opinion and have a say in these debates and arguments over the last 3 years as I've served on the committee. And I've heard, you know, I try to understand both sides of the arguments. I mean, there's no doubt we just closed the abalone fishery in the entire state. So it is now illegal to take any abalone in the state of California, no matter the size, no matter the month, no matter the species. And I'm very aware that that was a $24 million industry in Northern California, and dive shops have closed that have been around for 50 years. And, you know, it wasn't commercial industry anymore, but people would come from all over the country to be able to go and have their pilgrimage to dive in Northern California and show their kids how to dive for abalone in California. Mm-hmm. And so I have an understanding and an appreciation for that. But sometimes things are outside of our control, and this was not the fault of fishermen. The fishery, I believe, was being managed well because it was still open. But we just lost all their food. The kelp forests have collapsed in Northern California. And so sometimes we just you know, they were still angry that we were shutting it down, but sometimes you have to manage on behalf of the environment and behalf of the abalone itself. So are there still some up there? God, I hope so. But they're really struggling for food and for habitat. So we need to stop for just a little bit and manage that and hopefully fix that, which I spearheaded that effort to start the restoration of kelp in Northern California because no one was doing anything. So hopefully that'll get fixed, and then perhaps one day again, we'll have a fishery for abalone.
I think it's a great message, like the importance of engaging in those conversations and being part of the process, acknowledging, like you did, you know, the struggles and the realities of these hard decisions. That's such a key part. I think a lot of times in situations that are difficult, where there's no clear answer, oftentimes with polarization, you can, you know, push to one camp and the other, when in reality, you know, we're all kind of somewhere in the middle trying to figure it out and make it work. And for people that are, you know, maybe if you used to go diving for abalone in California and you can't, maybe a fun opportunity is to volunteer with you and go out and go diving and help, you know, do surveys. For people, is that something that you accept? If people want to come and volunteer, how do they learn more about that with you?
Well, I just got, one of the things I was working on during the pandemic was a brand new website. And so I have a beautiful new website, and on the page on the website for volunteering, you can sign up and it'll send me an email, and it asks you, what do you want to help with? And are you a certified diver? And you can tell me exactly what you're interested in doing. If some people want to do graphic design. Some people want to do diving. Some people are interested in, hey, can I help you with communications? So that's one of the most beautiful things about doing this work, is it requires every discipline. And so, yes, absolutely. I would love to have volunteers. Send me an email on my website, getinspiredinc.org. And I actually respond to everybody who sends an email, and I'll have a conversation with you and figure out how we can work together, because I'm only one person that does all this, and I am not responsible for all of these successes. It's me and my team of my community who have done all of this fantastic, successful work.
So that leads me into my final question. I've always been so impressed by how much you've been able to do, with how you're able to inspire people. You're, essentially one person running this organization, but you engage so many people, so many students in the classrooms, in the field work. As someone that has worked with, you've worked with at this point thousands of students, and you're always so positive and enthusiastic, and I think that positivity, it's contagious. For students that are, whether you're in high school or middle school, or maybe you're a recent graduate student or something, and you're kind of looking to get your footing in the marine science community, or the marine conservation community. You're trying to get momentum moving to make the world a better place. What general kind of wisdom do you have to offer them? How can people aspire to have the kind of positivity, enthusiasm, work ethic that you have to just keep forging ahead, even in a year as difficult as this?
That's a really, really good question. And I usually get at least one email a month, if not more, of people asking me, either they're students, or they want to be students, or they're just tired of working at the job they're at, and they're kind of fed up with and feeling hopeless about all of the stresses and pressures that are being put on us, messages being given to us about the things that are going wrong on the planet. And so what I usually say is, it's very difficult to make a living doing what I'm doing, but nothing says you have to be employed by a university to do research, or to be a member of the Department of Natural Resources, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, to be a researcher. If you look back in history at a lot of the famous science that came out of the 1600s and 1700s and 1800s, those guys weren't even scientists, some of them, or they were scientists in other fields. But they had a very keen interest and a curiosity and an observational skill. And believe it or not, we're all born with that. Every single one of us, if you have children at a young age, you know that we're all born scientists. We continuously ask questions. We're watching everything. And so we're born perfect scientists. Somehow we lose some of those skills, or we don't hone in on them. And some of us do. So I would encourage everyone to be a scientist. And now more than ever, that's very easy to do with opportunities like the ones I have to be a citizen scientist, where I encourage all the time people, if you have an idea, research it. I have a nonprofit organization. We can run things through this organization, and you can do projects through this organization, and you can publish papers. I even willingly share my data with my volunteers, because they can see things that I can't sometimes. There's a lot of data I've generated. So, if you're interested in analyzing data, great, I'll give it to you. Perhaps we can write a paper together on it. There's a lot of opportunity, and I know there's not a lot of hours in the day, which makes it difficult, but even me, sometimes I have to go work other jobs to make a living. And so, you can be a barista at Starbucks and come home on the weekends and research Pycnopodia sea stars in Northern California. I have a very good friend, I have several actually, who do just this. I have a good friend who's a terrestrial bird ecologist, and he really, really loves the ocean. So he does his bird ecology work, and he works for U.S. Fish and Wildlife and makes a decent salary, but he really loves the ocean. So he volunteers with me, and in his free time, he volunteers with me. And he is one of the world's top known researchers on giant sea bass, because he found out that that when they're juveniles, like a centimeter long, they actually live in the sand at the mouth of giant deep trenches along the coast of California. How did he know that? Because he's an observer. He'd go out there and just watch things in the sand. And he went, hey, what's that? Now he's the world's foremost expert on these giant sea bass. He didn't go to school for that. I have another friend who's not even a scientist. He's a diver and a keen observer. And because he loves nudibranchs and he's an excellent photographer, he has named 5 different species of nudibranchs around the world because he found them and nobody else knew they existed. So there is so much opportunity for you to make change, make a difference, and contribute to science. You just have to want to do it. And sometimes you just need a little push, somebody telling you, yeah, it's okay. I'm happy to do that. I do it with kids all the time. I help kids write research papers and publish research. So of course, I'm happy to do that with you too. But I encourage it, because you may see things totally differently than I do or another scientist would. So keep that in mind. You know, not everybody can make a living doing this, and really, we have too many of you trying to do it already. So go be an engineer. We need you there right now. And then go out in the ocean, your love for wherever it is. Maybe it's in the desert, it's in the mountains, in the forests, and just go watch things. That's where the magic happens.
I love that. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's such a important and inspiring message. And oftentimes, especially in like the ivory towers of academia, it feels like, well,
Absolutely.
you can't even participate unless you have this degree or that degree. And it's absolutely not the case. And I totally adhere to the idea that you were saying that we were born scientists. And the way I like to explain it is, we're all like hardwired feedback loop animals. And when you're a child, like when you're like a toddler learning to walk and you put your hand on a hot surface and you burn it, it hurts. You get this negative feedback, and then you look at it again, and you're very unlikely to put your hand there again. And that's part of this hardwired feedback loop of evidence. And then you make a conclusion, and then you create a hypothesis, and this is what humans do. I mean, everyone's born this way. So this idea that you have to have some, accreditation or something in order to go and get involved is totally not true. And it's such a great message. It was so inspiring to hear you say that as well. Um,
I also want to point out, Patrick, because whatever you're doing, whatever you're good at, may actually be able to help people like me. And this is exactly what you're doing, Patrick, is that you have a PhD, right? Yeah. And you have a company that is supporting research around the world. So inadvertently, you are changing the world through your apparel lines, because you're funding all of this fantastic work that researchers are doing. So you are making all of it possible. So don't forget that whatever gift it is you have, that can feed the things that are doing the research. If you're not a researcher, but you have this desire to be part of it, a graphic designer, communications, writer, artists. Oh my God, art is so important in science. I can't even stress that enough. So talk to me or somebody else and ask how your talents and what you're good at, what you like to do, can help these things.
I
Whale
think
sharks or tiger sharks or sockeye salmon or
I think it was an interesting thing for me finishing my PhD and trying to decide what to do next. And there was a very strong feeling like that I should enter into applied research. And I just got this advanced degree, and I really struggle with that because I felt like I like had to do that for some reason. Um, and what really helped me, my academic advisor he was really cool about this, about identifying what you're good at and identifying like what work kind of comes naturally. And for me, I could do MATLAB and crunch numbers and go into the field and do the science, but I definitely enjoyed um, interacting with people more, and thinking more about the large scale challenges of the issues, and thinking creatively about how to address these things. And um, I just had like a little bit of a um, interests were a little bit less aligned with fundamental research. And yeah, it's a bit of a leap of faith to just sort of be like, you know what, I don't have to do it this way, but I can still be involved, and I can help people using what are more my strengths. And I think I know a lot of people in grad school it's scary to try to accept what your one is good at, and accept maybe what you aren't necessarily as good at, and then investing in your talent so that it can improve things, maybe better. But I love that message. It's something I'm still flushing out every day of my career. Um, for people that want to learn more about you, that want to follow you on social media, what's the best way for people to stay up to date with all things that are happening with Get Inspired?
Well, number one, I want to read you my mission because it just echoes everything we just said, and that's to inspire stewardship and curiosity for the natural world through the exploration of science. And you can, everything that I do, I try to focus in. I love science so much. I love asking questions and the inquiry and the curiosity. And as I said, it is everyone's birth gift to do that. So pay attention and ask questions. Um, and you can ask me to help you if you're interested. And you can go to my website, send me inquiries. I also have a Facebook page, Get Inspired is on Facebook. I have a Twitter feed. I have a Instagram, Get Inspired as well. And I also have a green abalone OC page on Instagram. So whenever there's news about abalone, they have a Facebook page and they have an Instagram page as well. So I put everything up there for people who really love the abalone. And there's so many that do. So thank you for bringing attention to them. When I first started this, really the only people that were interested were people over 60. And they'd come to me and they'd say, I ate too much abalone when I was younger and I feel guilty. And so I want to help you. And you've turned the abalone into this beautiful thing that people look at from the inside out and discover what they are and their role in the ecosystem and what happened to them. And so I really appreciate you bringing them to light.
It's absolutely our pleasure, and thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. Every time you and I have a conversation, I want to like run out and like make the world a better place. So you're so inspiring, and everyone that's watching this, please follow Nancy and her work. She posts really cool stuff. I love like when you were spawning, she posts updates. It's like super awesome content you definitely want to see. And we'll have to do this again. Maybe a year from now, we'll do a check-in so people can follow up on all your exciting work. And thank you again for taking the time to chat with us today.
Thank you, Patrick.